All right, everybody, we're starting the third segment here. Mrs. Jade Cassius is going to be asking the first question. You're just going to.
All right. Speaking with Emily Kohler, Director of Planning, a few months back, the need for retention and keeping families here was a concern due to many moving out of our city to better opportunities. Eventually, the grandparents were also moving to be closer to their grandchildren away from Amarillo. What are some ideas to prevent this from continuing here in Amarillo? Mr. Don Collins?
Well, there are a lot of people moving in Amarillo, but they're moving outside of Amarillo to Randall, between Randall and Canyon, and on the south side. So we need to make the whole city a better picture for them to kind of stay where they are, and also it has to do with schools. A lot of people are putting their children in private schools or moving to a different school district. So I think it all starts with education and the school district and keeping it fresh, and that way maybe their parents will not move to south or between here and Canyon.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
Thank you, Don. And after you go, could you just... Don's still helping me.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I have a goal to make Amarillo easier to do business with. The number one way that we help ourselves with what we can control is by instilling trust once again back into our citizens in the form of our residents, our business owners, our entrepreneurs, and then also our building community. It is too difficult to do business within our city limits. That's why you're seeing people choose to do business outside of the city when it pertains to growth. And so one way that we can do this is we can put trust back into our building safety department, and we can make it easier by allowing common sense practices with lesser codes and restrictions that aren't life safety. They still hold us due to quality and controls, but then they're only pertinent to what is our business, and everything else stays personal responsibility for our citizens. And if we trust our citizens, we'll see a bottom line exponent that will reach something greater than what we can imagine on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mrs. Winston.
You have to ask the question of why. Why are our children going off to school and graduating and going to college and deciding that they don't want to come back to Amarillo? The reason why they're not coming back to Amarillo is because they don't have anything here to embrace. There's not enough opportunity here in the city of Amarillo for them to embrace. And if we have good parenting, people who love their children, love their families, that's what's going to happen. They're going to, the parents are going to move where the children are because there's nothing to do here in Amarillo. We had a water park way out there off of I-40. Okay, why come they didn't build a water park closer to Wonderland? You have people that are touring and coming through Amarillo to have fun. Somebody might decide, well, you know what, we'll do Wonderland today and tomorrow we'll do Water World the next day. As a community, we need to have more things to do in our city and to embrace.
Thank you, Mrs. Winston. Ms. Powell, you're next.
Yes, as serving on the city council currently, again, my focus is about the young generation. And our young generation, they are looking for a better quality of life. And so what they want is good jobs with good benefits and good salaries. And we need a livable salary or a livable wage. The other thing that they want is they want parks. They want things to do. Again, the Civic Center always comes up, but it needs to be renovated, updated. We cannot bring in different entertainers or different acts because we cannot check those boxes. And so loading docks are outdated, ceilings are too low, you don't have the electrical plugs where they need to be, but our young generation, they want a better quality of life to stay here in Amarillo, so they are looking for things to do.
And Mr. Burnett.
Sorry, I'm reading the question again, just to make sure I understand it. So, from talking to younger people, what I understand and what I see, and what I've been guilty of myself, is they want to be heard. They want a place where they can bring in their new ideas. Some of us are getting older, and it's time for us to step back and let the younger generation build the city and build the community that they want to live in. And so when we close our minds to that and we don't listen to them and we don't listen to the ideas that they have, then they're going to leave. And in turn, their parents are going to leave to go see their grandkids. And so what we need to build is we need to build a community for the future, because our days are just passing by now. And so we've had our time of our community, and it's time for us to open our eyes and open our ears and quit telling them no and let them build it, because what's the worst that could happen? They might succeed if they had our support rather than us condemning them.
And would any of you guys like to give a rebuttal or response to anything that has been said in these questions so far? Mrs. Winston, go ahead.
I want to go back to why is it that the certain parts of the city is not growing. Amarillo North Side community, the whole North Side community, Northeast Side community, there is no reason why the North Side community is left on the back burner in the Northeast Side of the community. A mayor is supposed to make sure that they have policies that are going to represent the entire city. There is no need for one side of the city to be left unattended, and I'm very adamant about that.
Thank you, Mrs. Winston. Would any of the other candidates, Mr. Collins, you can go ahead. And you'll have 30 seconds. Okay. Mr. Burnett, did you want to? Okay, we'll wait.
So the opportunity for a good job in the city is here. Our economical development has brought good jobs, good manufacturers to Amarillo. They have brought in 3 new ones that are not here yet. Be about 3,500 new jobs. And as far as the youth having something to do, they have built downtown for the youth. They come there every night. Yes, they are the future, but us seniors are also the future. We would like to be able to enjoy entertainment and do things.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Would any of the other candidates like to respond or rebut what was just said? Any candidates? Great. Okay, well, with that, we're going to go to our next question, and he's just going to be Mr. Stanley will be going next, so you can hand that off to all the other candidates as well. In June of last summer, Mayor Ginger Nelson signed and joined with other Texas mayors signing an open letter calling for Greg Abbott to call a special session to pass gun control legislation. If elected, would you use your position and voice as mayor to support similar gun control efforts? If not, please explain your rationale. Mr. Stanley, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for that good question. So when Mayor Nelson signed on with the other big city mayors in that letter that was written to represent us and our feelings up here to Governor Abbott, I also wrote a response in a letter to that, and I did agree with Mayor Nelson in the letter in the things that make common sense, like armed security on campuses, if that's possible. How do we do that? enforcing the laws that are already on the books in the way of, waiting period and background checks. But then my big issue was a non-negotiable, and that's your Second Amendment right, that's your Fourth and your Fifth Amendment right. And so, thank you. So with your Second Amendment right, what was written in the letter was red flag laws. And so a red flag law goes directly against common sense. It's proven itself not to be effective 90-something% of the time in stopping any kind of crime. And then it puts the power in the hands of the government for any reason that they come up with to come into your home and seize that weapon based on you being a potential threat. And that doesn't give you the right to a fair trial.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mrs. Powell, you're next. Or no, Mrs. Winston, you're next. I apologize.
I believe in the Second, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendment. I do. I believe that every individual who owns a home should be able to protect their home. And I will say this, and I will say it again. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And I believe that if you have the correct training throughout different, like with the schools and everything, I think that we are good. But guns don't kill people. People kill people. And I think that every man or woman who is trained to have a weapon in their home, I think it's a go for me. I felt like this all my entire life.
Thank you. Mrs. Powell, you're next.
Yes, so I support legislation that does not infringe upon someone's right to own a gun. And so you and I have the right to bear arms. What we need to do is make sure that we are hiring the talent that we need in our police department, so the police personnel, and then we need to equip those police officers with the ability to do data and analysis collection so that we can get to the root cause of the gun violence, not only in Amarillo, but across other cities. So we need to look at recruiting good talent, because I'm all about the right to bear arms, and I don't want anybody infringing upon my rights as well.
And Mr. Burnett.
I also believe in the right to bear arms, and I believe in the right to protect yourself, but I also believe that we have a lot of people that are getting guns that shouldn't be getting guns. And so if it was something to discuss background checks on mental health, then I would absolutely be for it. As far as just coming and taking your guns, I would not sign something like that. But I do believe that we need to look at what kind of things we're doing as far as how people are getting guns, because a lot of these people, it comes back to the mental health issue, and I think that that needs to be a subject of discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
I support everybody having a gun. I think education is an important part. We need to start educating our children when they're young and make sure they do know how to handle a gun. You know, if we took the guns away from us, bad guys would still get the guns. So we need to protect ourselves and educate and educate. Back when I was young, I took a class in firearms, how to handle it and what to do with it. So keep our guns, keep them out of the bad guys. Thank you.
And would any candidates like to speak on what has been said on that question? Anybody? Ms. Powell, go ahead.
So again, what we need to do as citizens, we need to make sure that our guns are locked up and that they are safe and out of the reach of our children. And because a lot of the crimes that are committed are usually guns that are stolen, and it's usually associated with drugs. But if we can start at home first by making sure that our weapons are locked up and in a safe place. That would help all of us.
Mr. Collins, you can go ahead. Okay, yeah.
So another problem which I dealt with in my life is mental illness. You know, we need to keep that in check and make sure, you know, she said lock up our guns and safe. So if we have somebody that is has a mental problem, we need to keep those firearms away from them because you never know. So mental illness is a sickness and they can't help it, and the public needs to realize that it is like heart trouble or even a common cold or whatever. We need to respect them, but we need to protect them.
Thank you. And Mr. Burnett, we saw you leaning over. Did you want to give a rebuttal? Was that what you were leaning over? Did you want to give a rebuttal? It looked like you were leaning. Great, okay. Is anybody else want to give a rebuttal there? Great, we're going to go to our next question. This one's going to be asked by, I believe, Mr. Avila.
On March 2nd of 2021, Governor Abbott issued an order lifting the mask mandate in Texas, increasing capacity of all businesses in the state to 100%. However, our city website issued a statement just a month later, dated April 4th, 2021, citing Governor Abbott's executive order dated 7 months prior. Why would city leadership revert to an executive order dated 7 months earlier and not recognize the most recent executive order from just 1 month before? Considering the losses local small businesses incurred due to these mandates, was this handled correctly? Yes or no? And if you could please explain your position.
As far as the mandate on the mask, dealing with COVID and sickness and all that, I think that, you know, as a society, we have went through enough with COVID, and I just feel like it's up to the individual to decide if they want to wear a mask or not for protection. Honestly, I feel like the whole COVID thing was, my opinion, was it was I think it was all a conspiracy. It started off in Asia. Whatever it was, I don't know if it was a bat or a monkey, I don't know. But I think that our government in the United States saw an opportunity to run with it, and they did.
And
but at the
that
end
is
of
your
the
time,
day,
Ms. Winston.
I am sorry for the people that we did lose. But enough is enough.
Thank you, Mrs. Winston. Mrs. Powell.
Okay, so here we go. So as part of the current council, and you know, we were up on COVID and not knowing anything about the disease or about where it came from, we made the best decisions that we could make to protect the citizens in Amarillo. So, you know, if we would to have another pandemic, would we do something different? Yes, we would look to lessons learned, but I can tell you that we had the best COVID medical clinic throughout the United States, and we made national news, and our focus was just to make sure that we were trying to protect people and keeping our community safe. And I give kudos out to our public health department because I thought that was ran very well. And then we had people from outside of the United States coming to Amarillo to get vaccines. And so, again, I'm working with a pandemic that I knew nothing about, and I was not there for the Spanish flu, so I didn't have any resources to use. So I think that I made the best decision possible.
Thank you, Mrs. Powell. Mr. Burnett, you are next. Did you need the slip of the question, or are you good?
It's okay.
Okay, great.
So, when COVID started, I was at the root of where it started. I haul meat for a living, so I went into the meat packing plants, and I had to make a decision to not come home to my family so that each and every one of you could have groceries in the stores. And so I understand what it's like. I also understand what it's like to lose somebody from COVID. And all politics aside, I think that our council had no experience with a pandemic. I think that since 1912, we haven't had a pandemic. And is there things that we could do better the second time around? Probably so. But for the way that it was done the first time, I don't think there's a city out there that did it the right way or had a good way to do it. I think we were all just, boats crashing through the storm trying to do the best we could. And so, do I think today we would do things differently? I think if we had even the same city council would probably make different decisions, absolutely. But I don't think it's my place to stand up here and judge what they did in the middle of an emergency that they had no experience and no written rule book on.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Mr. Collins, you're next. The question's going to be up there, so you can read it real quick.
Well, first of all, I think it's everybody's own decision whether they wear one or not. So working in a drugstore when COVID hit, I had to retire because my wife was ill and I didn't want to bring it home to her. I seen firsthand what COVID did, and it wasn't pretty. But those days have passed. So I just leave it up to each individual. Now, I know there's some people out there that their immune system is way down and they wear masks. That is fine with them. I choose not to. So far, I have been fortunate and haven't catching COVID, but I did wear a mask and I wore it for the safety of my wife. So it's everybody's own personal decision whether they do or not.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
So, fact-based decisions, peer-reviewed analysis, data, that's what we didn't do. It's currently what we're still avoiding. So we still have the same problem coming out of this issue. So in the way of me wearing a handkerchief wrapped around my face in order to protect you from a virus, that's like trying to keep a mosquito out with chain link fence. It doesn't make sense. It's not common practice. It harmed our community. It put us at odds with each other. It damaged our businesses. What we found out through COVID was how little control we, the people, actually had when it came down to a public health authority that chose to take a narrative and not to review the data that they were currently getting. We as people stopped looking at what would be the best for our citizens. It's very real what happened, and I don't make light of it at all. We lost loved ones. I lost loved ones. And it was because we didn't help the people like we were supposed to. We had treatments that we could have given them, and we chose not to give those treatments.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. And before we go into our next question, would anybody like to respond to that or anything said so far? Nobody?